Good afternoon, Westwood, and welcome to the Wolverine Report, episode 14. Evan Cardimino, Charlotte Lynch, Marie Fiscaldo, and I am Morgan Donahue. Folks, today we have an absolute legend of a guest.
Don't go that far.
We have someone we wanted to get on for a while, and someone who's definitely at the top of our list, and someone we've gotten to know the last several weeks, months, and been a really great partnership here at Westwood Media Center. Someone who is doing a lot of great things here in the community, and someone who's done a lot of great things over his career, and excited to talk about that, bring his story to you folks, as well as the community. But folks, we have Tom Leyden on as a guest. Tom, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's been awesome to get to know everybody here in this building really well over the course of the last year. And I'm honored to be here in this capacity because it's a little bit different from what you've been doing, the track record that you've laid down here, because you've really gone down the halls of history and brought in some old Westwood legends that have great stories. Now, I do not fall in that category. I did not grow up here. I've been here for 10 years. And I've enjoyed it immensely and met a lot of great people, but it's a little bit different. So I hopefully will live up to your expectations.
Well, Tom, don't sell your story short. You've been here for 10 years, but you've done a lot in 10 years. You love this community. The community loves you back. You're doing a lot of things for this community that really I feel is bringing the community together. And we'll talk about that. But wanted to kind of start off with Tom, the person. So you grew up in the Northeast, grew up in Connecticut. Really special place, great sports town. You had some great siblings, great family around you. Talk us through a little bit of that. Where did you grow up? What was it like growing up where you grew up, and what were some of your favorite memories?
Well, I am the youngest of 27 cousins, if you can imagine that. So my oldest cousin at this point is beyond 70.
Yeah.
And I'm 52. So I was the caboose of the generation.
Yeah.
And that was great. I have two older sisters. You may have even met both of them, Peggy and Patty. And Peg, in 1980, went to Boston College.
Yes.
Now, we're from Westport, Connecticut, and the family had deep ties to Holy Cross.
Yep.
Like my grandfather went to Holy Cross. I have two uncles that went to Holy Cross. One played football there. I have a cousin who went to Holy Cross. And then here comes, the fall of 1979, and Peggy says, I'm going to Boston College. That was like sacrilege in our family because of the deep purple blood that ran through the Nuss family. And Peggy ended up going to BC, and we were actually at the BC-Michigan State game recently, and we looked at each other and said, do you realize the first game we all went to together was 44 years ago? Like BC played Army in the rain in 1980, and because it was raining against Michigan State, we recalled that memory, and it's been a long time. So when people ask me, like, who do you really root for? I mean, I root for BC probably more passionately than anybody because of all the experiences I've had in my life. But it has changed. But imagine what it was like when you were an 8-year-old kid, 8, 9, 10, and 11, growing up in the Doug Flutie era and going to those games in person.
Yeah.
So it was definitely Northeasterners. We got sucked into the Boston tradition because of Peg. BC was a much different school back in 1980 than it is in 2024. Yeah. But it has evolved, as we all have, and we still love going back to the games. But definitely Northeast in the blood. I grew up Southwestern Connecticut, so sorry, Boston fans, but I was a strange combination of Giants, Mets, Knicks, Rangers.
Makes sense. I went to college, and we used to call some of these kids powerhouse 90s fans, where there'd be kids from like Vermont, and their team would be the Cowboys, the Yankees, Michigan, and we'd say, that makes no sense. Yours makes sense because they're kind of, within the areas.
Well, here's what it came down to. When the Giants and Jets were playing in the 60s, the Giants tickets were a lot like the Patriots tickets were recently. You couldn't get them.
Yeah.
Right. And my parents were in their 20s. They were looking for something to do with their brothers and sisters and tailgate, and they couldn't go to Yankee Stadium. So they're like, well, let's go check out this other team.
Yeah.
And they went and became Jets fans, not rooting against the Giants. They root for both of them. Now, separately, it was much different with baseball because they were never Yankee fans. They were always Brooklyn Dodger fans.
Interesting.
And when the Dodgers and Giants headed to the West Coast, my parents, both of them separately, obviously in different places, were like, oh, no, we're not rooting for the Yankees, right? So they literally waited for the Mets to show up in 1962 and became Mets fans. Okay. So, I mean, to her credit, and God rest her soul, my mother was fantastic and a huge sports fan. And this is the God honest truth. I know you had friends growing up in high school. You'd go out and you'd come home and mom would check in, right? Yeah. Here's how my mom checked in when we'd come home from the beach in the summer. She's like, okay, boys, the Mets are beating the Padres 5-4. It started off with Keith Hernandez ripping a single down the right field line. And then shortly thereafter, Gary Carter put one in the gap and Hernandez went to third. And then Darryl Strawberry, he had a sacrifice fly. I mean, it was crazy. And my friends would be like, this is your mom?
Legend.
And I'm like, oh yeah.
Oh, what a
huge baseball fan. She watched the Mets and watched baseball. She did adopt the Red Sox a little bit because that's all she could watch here in her final few years. Yeah. But she always loved watching baseball.
So sports were, really in their blood, and they obviously got you guys introduced to, the teams that they followed and whatnot. Is that how you kind of got into sports, was just for the love that they showed for sports? Or, what was your earliest memories of getting into sports?
No question about it. Well, I was always very active myself and on the field, but I recall vividly my first games were right in that 1980 range, right? So it was a rush of all of these sports, whether it be going to a BC football game with Steve Diossi and Brian Brennan on the field for the Eagles. You know the names. It's Scott Gieselman, right? These are the names of the 1980s Boston College football studs. But beyond that, I remember going to my first Giants game, Giants and Cardinals, in November of 1980. And the first Mets game was actually, get this, a old-timers game between the Dodgers and the Mets. So that was really cool, because you had all the old-time Brooklyn Dodgers who were back at Shea Stadium. I didn't know from Adam, right? But my parents were thrilled. And then you had all the Mets old-timers from like the 1969 World Series and the 1973 World Series. So that was my indoctrination into Major League Baseball. Yeah. And I went with my parents all the time. We have great memories of going to games. And, of course, I got involved on the field myself.
Yeah. So sports you played growing up. I know you played football. You were a quarterback. Any additional sports to football?
Oh, yeah. I was your basic football, baseball, basketball junkie growing up. I went to a school very similar to Zavarian, Fairfield Prep. And when I got there, I was 5'10", 135. And didn't think anything of it until the first day of football practice. I looked around and our offensive line as freshmen averaged 200 plus. I'm like, oh, this is different, right? Yeah. So I went home after that first year of playing football every night, just absolutely beaten up. And I did not play quarterback. I was the backup quarterback, but I played safety. Yeah. And I was physically beaten. Yeah. And I had to just have that temperature check that, like, this is not for me. Yeah. I can't live my life this way where I'm just so physically beaten each and every day. Is it a regret that I didn't finish the football journey? A little bit, most notably because the team won a state championship in 1988. But those were a lot of my friends who I enjoyed watching them enjoy some success. And basketball, played some basketball. Baseball was really my best love. Yeah. I watch football games and I say to myself, I don't think I could coach football. Yeah. I mean, I know football, but in terms of the X's and O's and schemes and languages that are different on every team, I don't think I could coach football. I could definitely coach basketball, and I could absolutely coach baseball and softball. I mean, I know those sports backwards and forwards, and that's what I really enjoyed playing the most. And then when I couldn't play football anymore, I became a runner, right? So I ran cross country, I ran track, and I didn't really love that, but it kept me engaged.
Are there any guys that you modeled your game, either football, basketball, or baseball, growing up that you kind of took as inspiration?
Sure. I mean, don't forget, during that time, the best teams were the Steelers, right? The Cowboys, who I hated. The Giants had not really enjoyed any success in the late 70s and early 80s. But I mean, so by the time they started succeeding, I didn't really say I had modeled a game after any of those guys. But I mean, the Terry Bradshaws. I was a weird Rams fan. I liked Vince Ferragamo and Pat Hayden. And I was one of the few people rooting for the Rams in Super Bowl 14 against the Steelers because I liked their uniforms. But we all start somewhere.
That's I mean, the 80s were a heck of a time. College football was unbelievable. Like when you think about the Oklahoma teams, and you think about Bo Jackson. I love to think about, especially Northeast, that 1985 Heisman candidacy, where Bo Jackson ultimately won, but Sports Illustrated did like a fun little article. It said, the three candidates. Bo Jackson had Chuck Long, then had like an obscure candidate as number 3. It was Joe Dudek out of Plymouth State.
I remember that.
I remember that. But think about that. Those 3 years in a row, you had Herschel Walker,
Yes.
then you had Doug Flutie, and
Yes.
then you had Bo Jackson. But the BC games were so big back then. People here now can't even understand it. I mean, those who lived through it remember it. But back in the 80s, I mean, they were so popular and taking the nation by storm so much that they had to move the games to whatever the stadium was called back then, whether it be Sullivan or Schaefer at the time. And that's when they played teams like Alabama in Schaefer Stadium and Penn State.
Yeah.
And they came up with the wins. And they were just so exciting to watch. And that 84 year where Flutie won the Heisman, they were a legit team. He changed the school. I mean, that's no secret that he changed the school. But there's BC pre-Flutie and post-Flutie. And to see what it has become after he really put the school on the map athletically is insane. Because it's not just football. It's so many of the other sports too.
And he was like the epitome of Boston College, like, overlooked a little bit. But when they do their best, their voice is loudest on the field when they're playing, and they are taking down number one teams in the nation. And Doug Flutie's maybe 5'6", and he was getting it done. He was overlooked at Natick. He was overlooked at BC. At one point they just said, we're down 30. Let's put him in. I believe he came back and won that game. But to do what he did in '84, that pass to Phelan, I think will be a top 5 memory in Boston sports history. And, obviously, I think that changed the program. There's always the saying of Alumni Field is the field that Flutie built. I don't think that field is brought today without, what Doug Flutie did and those teams did in the 80s, early 80s, mid 80s.
You shortchanged him. He's 5'9" ¾ and don't you forget it. But I will say we were such diehards and so engaged with that team that we actually became season ticket holders to the New Jersey Generals. So when Doug signed with the Generals, I was a huge USFL fan.
Yeah.
And it was different then. The USFL is not what the UFL is now, but it was a legit competitive competitor to the National Football League, and they had big time names. And so we went to those games and we saw Doug Flutie playing and Herschel Walker playing and Mike Rozier, who'd won a Heisman at Nebraska, and Reggie White was in that league. Jim Kelly was in that league. Steve Young was in that league. So these were like legit players. And we had a great time, a half-empty Giant Stadium, watching the Generals running around. And then, of course, Reggie White crushed Doug Flutie's collarbone and knocked him out for the season. But it was great, great memories. A season in 1985 that ended with the Generals hosting the USFL championship game. And that was my first run-in with somebody who ultimately became a president, because the Generals were actually owned by Trump. And I was a young kid. I had a little notepad, and Herschel Walker was in the box right behind us that happened to be Donald Trump's box. And I just kind of, hey, will you sign this? And Herschel Walker goes, I'm like, oh my God, he's waving me into the box, right? So I walked around as a little 12-year-old kid, knocked on the door. Herschel Walker opens the door. He's like, hey, come on in. I'm going to introduce you to people. And sure enough, I met Mo Carthon, who was running back for the Generals, and a bunch of Bobby Leopold. I won't bore you with the other names, but Donald Trump was there. He came over, he shook hands.
That's awesome.
So I added it up. I have strangely like 5 run-ins with U.S. presidents over the course of my life. They're all very random.
So interesting question to ask. So, meeting some of these athletes as a kid and then getting into sports and broadcasting and being a sports director, you are interviewing a lot of these top athletes in the world. Did you ever have the opportunity to meet someone you met as a kid and say, you were awesome to me as a kid, thank you? Did that ever come full circle?
No, but I have a good counterpoint to that. I never interviewed Doug Flutie until the opportunity arose when BC was playing Notre Dame at Fenway Park. And if you remember the circumstances, tragically, Doug lost both of his parents on the same day.
I remember that,
Wild. And he had not spoken publicly about it. They died on Thursday or Friday. So the game's on Saturday. And here I am working for Boston 25, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this is literally a dude I idolized my whole life. And the first time I directly speak with him is going to be me asking him about his dead parents. Right. I'm like, I couldn't do it. So luckily my photographer, Walt McGraw, knew Doug from years of being around him. And I said, Walt, can you just slyly ask Doug if he's going to talk? I'm like, I just can't get myself to do it. And so Walt's like, I got you. And he went over and he just came back shaking his head. And I'm like, okay, cool. Because I really don't want that to be the first impression.
Well, good to ask, and it's the right thing to do. And, we'll have to make that happen. So you didn't talk to him, is what I'm guessing, right?
No, I have met him
Oh, you
and
have met
interviewed
him,
him when
okay.
I think he got inducted into the Massachusetts High School Hall of Fame, and I was
Long
there
overdue.
for that. Yeah, right. And I know a couple questions back and forth, but we went in 2020 when they were rolling back the 1980s games, and we had that like live commentary on YouTube when we were all in our homes. He was engaged with some of that, so we had some back and forth.
cool.
But yeah.
So BC, special place for you, and you go back. You were just there to watch the Michigan State game. There's also some connections to some Westwood families that you knew at BC at the time. Talk a little bit about that, and did they help sell you eventually to come to Westwood?
Yeah, a very dear friend, Susan Corcoran, who some of you from Westwood may remember from the class of, I guess, 89. Sorry to age you, Sue. She came to BC and told me that she was a Westwood High School graduate. I knew nothing about this town, Westwood. And she talked to me about how good the basketball program was, and that she had played basketball, but I didn't really play. I'm like, come on, how good could the basketball program be? Didn't think anything of it until like 25 years later when I finally came here and I looked up at the banners in Bader Gymnasium. I was like, oh my God, undefeated seasons right during her tenure. So she was the first person who I knew from Westwood. So when I came back, really the main reason that we chose to live here was because it was so close to Fox 25. So when I got the job at Fox 25, I was like, okay, great schools. I remember rounding the corner of Manhattan and seeing Westwood High School with my own eyes for the first time. And I was like, wow, I really love the way that looks. And I just really was attracted to the campus. I was like, that is a killer looking school. And then you learn about it and you realize how good the school system is. And our kids at the time were 9 and 7. So it made sense for us to move here. Now, shortly thereafter, the people who you refer to, Tom Kilgariff and Brian Dumais, who have had kids come up through the system, have succeeded at all the different sports. Killer was already here. And we actually, probably more Killer than me, convinced the Dumais to settle in Westwood.
Okay.
Yeah, so they came a little bit after us because Brian and Ann and their family have bebopped around the country as well. So those were the initial connections.
Interesting. Life's interesting. Where especially when you comes full circle, where you see people you went to college with, and then ultimately you're in the same town, and then you're back at college tailgating for a Michigan State BC game on a Saturday night.
Yeah, with our kids, right?
With your kids,
it's crazy.
yeah.
And some kids that have even graduated from college.
Yes.
When you think about the Kilgariff, Seamus is out of school.
And there's a Dumais at BC.
Yeah,
I think
Katie's at BC right now, but Robbie graduated from Clemson, so we're all getting old. But we're still living young on Saturdays.
You guys are, absolutely. But it's that's awesome. And that was a question I had, was ultimately how did Westwood get on your radar? But it started because it was, making the career change from Michigan to come to Fox 25. Before then, you were in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, from New York to Allentown to Detroit to Boston. That's the path.
It's an interesting path, but it's so, I think, unique because they're amazing sports towns in their own way. Michigan being one of the best sports towns for professional sports. You have, and then college too.
Yeah.
You got Ann Arbor, you got Michigan State, but then you have Original Six hockey and in the Red Wings. And when you were there, they had absolute legendary teams. You get Brett Hull, you get Lindstrom, you get Hasek they brought back, Robitaille. And then, the Tigers, dealing with a guy like Jim Leland.
Awesome.
I'd love to hear some of those stories. But and then you're in Allentown, which is probably one of, Pennsylvania being one of the most historic high school sports towns in the country, especially football. But I just remember watching on ESPN, they were talking about CB West and that streak, and I think the running back was like this kid Justin Picciotti. Picciotti.
Yeah.
And ESPN was covering them before they started covering LeBron, so it was that big of a deal. What can you tell us about the experiences you had in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and then coming to Fox? How special were all of those, and how different were all of those as well?
I pinch myself because I can't get over how incredibly lucky I've been throughout my life to be around teams and programs that win when I'm there. Because when you think about BC, I was there when we beat Notre Dame in South Bend, and when they were number 1 in the country.
Gordon with the
David
kick.
Gordon, right?
Yeah.
I wrote a big piece about that where I talked to all those players, but I was there for that, right? And then that same year, BC went to the Elite Eight. That was my senior year of college. So fast forward then to Pennsylvania, we did, and you guys would love this. I'd love to do this with you guys because you'd be so good at it. We did a 60-minute high school football show every single Friday night, off the cuff, unscripted. it was appointment television, and people would get home in time before 11 o'clock because they couldn't miss the big ticket. And I loved the environment that we worked in because everyone was just like the three of us, hustlers. Yeah. They did whatever it took to get the games on the air. They were engaged. They knew what was going on. They knew the players. They got the shots. And I think that's why the viewers really appreciated it. Yeah. So the first game I ever did was in September of 2000. And I think you're probably either a freshman or maybe even in 8th grade at that point. Grade, yeah. But I was told before I went there, like, hey, pay attention to this Wilson team because they may play this kid, a freshman at quarterback. I was like, really? Okay. So I go to the game, and sure enough, this kid takes the field. I was like, whoa. Yeah. Like, is this normal? Yeah. Like, what's going on here? It was Chad Henne.
Yeah.
And Chad Henne was a freshman in high school. And so I was able to watch his entire career, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. And a funny quick story about Chad. He, Penn State wanted him to be their quarterback. It came down to 5 schools. He made his announcement. He was in Pennsylvania. He said he was going to Michigan, and he got booed. Felt so bad for the kid, right? Because so many Penn State people wanted him to go to Penn State. But that was part of the experience in Pennsylvania, along with covering the legendary teams like CB West. Yes. Their 59-game winning streak got snapped during my first year that I was there. So I'm a bit overwhelmed by trying to absorb all these schools and traditions and teams. And it really hit me how passionate and how powerful this environment was. So I was a big believer in no matter what you're doing, just engage in it. Yeah. Wherever you are, just love it. Don't think you're better than it because you're not. Otherwise, you'd be somewhere else. Yeah. And just prove to people that what they care about, you care about. Yeah. So that was always my mission. Mm-hmm. So I loved high school football, did a lot of high school wrestling, believe it or not. Yeah. And people loved the fact that I gave wrestling its due. Yeah. They got 10,000 people in Hershey Park Arena for the state finals in Pennsylvania for wrestling. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. That was the case. Yeah. So I got the opportunity in 2004 to then go to the ABC affiliate in Detroit. And if you do the math about what happened between 2004 and 2015, a lot. Yeah. I mean, you're talking 2 Stanley Cup finals. You're talking 6 Final Fours between Michigan State and Michigan, 5 Rose Bowls.
PGA Championship.
2 World Series. The PGA Championship in 2008 was at Oakland Hills. We would cover IndyCar races when they came to town. The Lions did not go to the Super Bowl, but Detroit hosted a Super Bowl between the Seahawks and the Steelers in 2005, 2006. And I think the last
the
NBA Finals.
Triple Crown winner.
That we had Miguel Cabrera winning the Triple Crown there.
You had a great phrase on one of these too, the imperfect perfect game.
Oh, so what was crazy about Armando Galarraga's game was this. If you know geography, you know that Detroit is still in the Eastern time zone.
Yes.
Okay. So what I vividly recall about that game is it started at 7:00 and it was still like daytime at the end of the game because it went so fast. A perfect game goes so quickly. I remember the sun wasn't even hinting at going down. So it was still daylight. We're pushing close to 9:00 in Michigan. And, everyone knows what happened. But that was a really great example of what 3 people will be remembered for. I think Jim Leyden handled it really well. I think Jim Joyce handled it really well. And I think Armando Galarraga handled it really well. But I do recall being in the clubhouse and we're all looking at the replays for kind of the first time with the players because they're still like befuddled that this happened to them and can't understand why it happened. And I was standing next to Armando as we're looking at the television screen and I looked at him and I was like, do they think you bobbled it? Like, what do they think happened there?
Missing something.
He goes, oh, no, man. I no bobbled it. Right? And so being around those types of situations were great. And the other Leland story that I want to quickly share is that this is the kind of guy he is. There was a legendary meteorologist by the name of Jerry Hodak who was retiring from Channel 7 after many, many years, many decades. Yeah. And he was throwing out the first pitch that night at Comerica Park. So before the game, you'd be in Jim Leland's office and he'd have his feet up on the desk, smoking a cigarette. And I didn't go all the time. So there were the beat writers who were there every single day. So you had to show these guys their respect. Mm-hmm. And I kind of waited my turn and like, should I be asking a question here or what? Yeah. So everyone kind of cleared out. And I said, Jim, I just need a minute of your time. What do you need? And I said, listen, Jerry Hodak, our longtime meteorologist, is being honored tonight, throwing out the first pitch. And he goes, oh, you want me to catch it? I was like, oh my God, that would be phenomenal if you would, but that was not my intention, right? I was like, I actually am hoping I could just pull you out on the field and just get a couple of quick answers from you about what a guy like Jerry means to the community. He's like, no problem, I'll be out in 10 minutes. So he pops out on the field. And sure enough, you would think Jim Leyland and Jerry Hodak had like 10 meals together.
Yeah.
Because Jim hops on camera and he says like, oh, guy like Jerry Hodak is the fabric of this community. And what he means to people here after being here for decades of time, I am honored to catch his first pitch tonight. And sure enough, made Jerry's world because he catches the first pitch, signs a picture that Jerry had brought.
Yes.
And I was like, this guy is something else.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so I could tell you many, many more Jim Leyland stories, but that one to me is the one that stood out because I just couldn't believe how human he was and how he got it. And if you listen to his Hall of Fame speech from this past summer, you understand how human he is and how much he gets it.
So he's not like that with everyone, and I think a key to having success in that in the sports industry, whether it's a journalist, whether it's broadcasting, is having good relationships with managers, players, and whatnot. I specifically read that Jackie McMullen would go to Celtics practices 2 hours early for a number of different reasons. One, she wanted to show she cares, but two, that's when Larry Bird was there. So Larry Bird eventually noticed, she's here 2 hours early. I'm here, shooting. Hey, who are you? How you doing? They developed a relationship because there was a mutual respect for how hard they worked at their craft. She was closer to Red Auerbach than anyone else. He respected how hard she worked. She asked great questions. Most importantly, she was trustworthy. How would you describe, when you're able to build relationships with, important people like managers like Jim Leyland? What was it? Was it, just the trust level? How did you get to that level with a guy like him where not every person in your industry can get that close?
Well, I think if you're fair, number one, and also ask questions directly.
Yeah.
I'm never a big fan of like, well, there are some people who are saying ...
Yeah.
It's like, well, what are you saying? Why are you asking the question? And I've tried to avoid that, along with the questions that say, talk about ...
Yeah.
Ask a pointed question, be direct.
Yeah.
I did a weekly segment with Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah.
And Ndamukong Suh was a very controversial guy in Detroit. And the Lions, who we had a partnership with, were like, listen, we're going to have him talk to you. So I'm like, no problem. So I ended up talking to Ndamukong, and I told him, I'm like, listen, you do stuff that's pretty stupid sometimes. And I'm going to have to talk about it. Because if I don't talk about it, I look like a jerk. Yeah. I look like an idiot. And I've got a reputation that I've got to protect too. But I'm not going to hammer it home, but we're going to talk about it. Yeah. So expect that I'm going to ask you, be prepared with an answer, and we'll move on. Yeah. He goes, got it, no problem. And so we had a great relationship. Same thing with guys like Nate Burleson, who we now know from CBS Sports. I mean, I think this is true that we gave Nate his first opportunity on television. Like he was on every Sunday night, Inside the Huddle with Nate Burleson. We're doing Inside the Huddle with Brad Pindell now, right?
Yeah.
So Inside the Huddle with Nate Burleson. And the other guy who I think I helped a lot was Dan Orlovsky, who we obviously know from ESPN. Yep. He was a backup quarterback for the Lions for many years.
UConn guy.
Yeah, UConn guy. And I recall we were down up at the Super Bowl in Minnesota when the Patriots were playing the Eagles.
Yes.
And Dan was basically doing what he does at home on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I ran into him at the Super Bowl and I was like, dude, you should come with me tonight to this party I'm going to because there's some pretty influential people who are going to be there.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he showed up and I got a chance to introduce him to some people. And next thing you know, he's like bigwig on ESPN.
He's awesome.
So it's all about those relationships because ultimately the players become retirees. Mm-hmm. And when they're retirees, they're just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And we're all on the same playing field for the most part. And they remember the people who were straightforward with them, shot it straight, and looked out for them too when you had to look out for them.
And there's definitely a friendship that I think you develop with these players. I saw an interview you did, and it was a tough time. It was when Kobe had passed away, and you doing an interview for Fox with your affiliate in Fox in LA,
Liz Habib. Yeah.
And the first thing you said was my condolences because I know obviously professionally you cover them, but also, you become friends with these athletes. And, that kind of stuck out to me that, these, people in the industry, they it's their profession, but they have a lot of friends with these athletes, their families and all that. And that was something that stuck out to me, that kind of was in alignment with, the relationships that you develop with them.
Yeah, you get to know the people. Not always everybody at the same level. There are certain athletes who want to remain protected, but I do have a great story. I've shared this publicly before, so I don't mind sharing it again. When we were in Houston for the Patriots Super Bowl against the Falcons, I had left Detroit in 2015, so now we're a few years beyond that. And I did a weekly show with Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
So we had a great relationship. He was actually the first person I told that I was leaving Detroit to come to Boston. He's like, really?
Did he keep the secret?
He did,
Good.
because I knew the season was about to end, and then I was going to have like all access shut off.
Yeah.
So it's not like I could text Matthew and be like, dude, it's been great. Thanks a lot. I'm out. So I told him early, like, I'm like, this is probably going to happen. I just wanted to let you know. So I hadn't seen him in a long time. And so it's like Thursday or Friday night of Super Bowl week, and we're in a Houston hotel lobby bar, and we're both tall. So he sees me across the bar, and we give each other that like, hey, what's up? Be right there. And sure enough, we connected about 5 minutes later, and it's like, hey, how you doing? And we're just catching up. And he said, listen, it was funny. NFL quarterback, right? He's like, listen, I got a question. I'm like, what? He goes, what's it like to cover Tom Brady?
Wow.
Right. Interesting to me. And I had the answer, because I'm like, dude, he's an international superstar.
Yeah.
Like, he's about to try to win his 4th Super Bowl right here. I'm like, win a playoff game.
Yeah.
He goes, oh man, that hurts. I'm like, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you gotta, once you, and he's not gotten to the level of Tom Brady, but he's won a Super Bowl now.
Yep.
And I just found it interesting that, you know, he wanted to know what it was like to be in that type of environment.
Yeah.
And I would say this, covering Brady's so different than covering like Gronk, because they're just such different people. Tom was never rude. Tom was just always guarded.
Professional.
Right? Absolutely guarded. Whereas Gronk would come out to his locker and he'd be like, hey guys, what'd you all do this weekend? You know, it's just totally different personalities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so after 11 years in Michigan, you made the decision to leave and come to Fox 25. How did this opportunity come about, and what ultimately brought you to Boston?
So it was, if you recall, the Jonas Gray game. Do you remember
Yeah.
the Patriots Jonas Gray
Indianapolis.
game?
Yeah.
Okay. It was the day after that. I got a phone call from the news director, Lee Rosenthal. I was like, oh, that's unexpected. And it was November of 14. And Lee said, hey, we just took over a new ownership group here at Fox 25. We're looking for some new people. We'd love for you to come be our sports director, or at least have a conversation about doing that. And that jarred me, because I was like, oh, okay. I knew that my contract was expiring in April, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I had kids in school, don't really want to move them until the end of the school year if we're going to move them. So I was like trying to tap the brakes a little bit, but the business doesn't really work that way. So it was a tumultuous time in my life and in my head, because we're trying to figure out what to do. Nicole, who I was married to at the time, and her parents and my parents, aging, were 800 miles away. So the appeal of moving back to the East Coast was great. Obviously, Boston's an incredible sports town. I knew it was a great move professionally, but there were complications. I mean, we were the official station of the Lions. We did the pregame show, the postgame show. They were having a great year in 2014. They were going to the postseason. We knew that this could conceivably be a run.
Yeah.
And you know, I got to be there for that. I was the guy.
Yeah.
And so I was telling Lee all of these things, and ultimately the Lions lost in the wild card round to the Cowboys. And I was on the bus with the team back to the airport, and he called. He goes, all right, so like, can we talk now? Like, is it time? Right?
Give you a day, because you're absorbing it too. I mean, obviously you're invested as well. So it's like those losses definitely sting, I'm sure, for, you know, anyone that covers the team too, you know.
It was a unique situation, and luckily there was buy-in across the board. Dolly and Olivia were 9 and 7.
Yeah.
So it was the time, like, listen, we're either going to stay here forever.
Yeah.
Because we loved Detroit.
Yeah.
The people there are absolutely fantastic. They absolutely just virtually hugged us the entire time we were there. And if it wasn't 800 miles away, I would venture to guess we'd probably still be there.
Yeah.
But we knew we either had to do it then or forever hold our peace.
Yep.
Because we couldn't move the girls in high school.
Yeah.
You know, we didn't want to do that. So with them being 9 and 7, we're like, now's the time. So that's when we pulled the trigger, and phrasing it like it was a sacrifice. It was an unbelievable opportunity to come here. And we can get into the relationship I have with Butch Stearns, which was excellent from day one when it couldn't have been, right?
Yeah.
You know, it could have gone the complete opposite direction, but Butch and I are fantastic friends, and we worked together basically from day one at Fox. Yeah. And I was there for 6.5 years. Yeah. And it is a different type of assignment here because, one, college sports is not the same. You don't have Michigan and Michigan State. You don't have Final Fours, and you have Frozen Fours, but you don't have Final Fours and NCAA tournament runs that you're covering very intensely. Rose Bowls, which are insane. That's definitely my favorite event I've ever covered. But you have Super Bowls, right? And you have World Series with the Red Sox, and you have the Stanley Cup Finals with the Bruins. So again, that goes back to what I was talking about before with how lucky I've been to have these types of events happen. But I will say this: I was like, what if I get there and I missed the Patriots party. Like, what if I'm late to the party and I'm the guy who's got to cover all the reunions and I don't even know those dudes, but
Yeah.
you're celebrating these reunions. And so that first year, they went to Denver and lost in the AFC Championship
remember
game.
that,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh man, I missed it. It's over. Oh no.
That was the Peyton Manning year, right?
Yeah. And so then the next year they go to the Super Bowl and it's 28-3. I'm like, oh. So selfishly thinking.
You're like, my bad
look,
luck?
This is
Yeah.
the worst. I absolutely missed the party. But the good news is they did go to 3 straight Super Bowls and they won 2 out of those 3. So I was like, okay, deep breath.
Yes.
At least you'll have the connection with these guys, the Slaters and
Yes.
McCourties
Yeah.
and Gronks and James White and those types of dudes. Ninkovich, Chris
Yep.
Long. I mean, so many
Yeah.
great characters and people to talk to.
Yeah. I mean, that was basically 2 dynasties. You know, Tom Brady had 2 careers. With the
3.
Patriots.
You can even break it down to you had 3. It's
true.
crazy.
Yeah. I mean, when you add in Tampa Bay on top of kind of, there was 2001 to 2007, and then there was the middle from 2008 to 2013, then went all the way to 2022 for a career. Not bad. And then not only winning 7 Super Bowls, but countless records for passing yards, wins, playoff wins. I don't think anyone's going to catch that. The amount of playoff wins he's had.
International superstar, right?
Yeah.
It goes back to the question Matthew Stafford asked, what's it like to cover Tom Brady? I mean, it's the same as it is for all of us watching him, right?
And that's a fascinating question that he asked you, because probably a question, he felt maybe a little uncomfortable asking another player. So it's a confident question of asking someone in confidence of what is it like, because he's preparing for himself. Now he knows what it's like.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't know what it's like to win 7 or 6, but you have to start at 1.
Well, I think it's amazing when I watch Matthew Stafford play now that, wow, I was there when his career started in
Yes.
2009 and he inherited a team that was 0-16. So it wasn't all good.
Yeah.
I did
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
live through an 0-16, the first
Yeah.
0-16 season, which was disastrous.
Yeah.
But, then he took over as quarterback and he's still playing.
Yeah.
And, my daughter, Olivia, diehard Lions fan. And, when he left to go to LA, she was like, what?
Yeah.
But she still remained true blue. She's still Honolulu blue true.
A heck of a year last year. Great quarterback. It was I think it was a good for both teams, to be honest. That trade. And you got a heck of a coach in Campbell.
Surprising. I got to be honest, surprising. I'd seen
my
so many
expectations-
coaches go through,
Yeah.
and I did not think that was the answer. And the fact that he's had as much success as he's had is awesome.
Yeah.
But it definitely took me by surprise.
No,
I think he brought that right mentality of grit. And he said it in his first interview too. He's going to bite someone's kneecaps. It's a great quote. We laugh at it, but it's the mentality the Lions, I feel like, lacked early on. And now that they have that, it's kind of, it's brought him back to life.
he's a gambler too, and I think the Lions take on the identity of Michigan. Hard working. It's kind of like the Bruins. Bruins in the 70s and 80s, they were hard, the big bad Bruins. These were tough guys, and the blue collar and the people who were in the crowd at the games could relate to these guys. And when you have a city in a city like Detroit, hardworking people, they are the engine that stirs our economic, our economy when it comes to cars, manufacturing, and all that. And to have them supporting those teams and see their players really, play physical, fight tooth and nail, take some risks. It really is. It's motivational for the fans, and they kind of feed off of each other.
There's no question about it, and it's beyond just Detroit too, because it's a lot like if you could imagine the equivalent size New England, right? So all of New England is probably comparable to Michigan as a state. And so when you're covering the Lions and you're the official Lions station, like you are piped throughout the entire state. So you can hop in your car and drive 5 hours away from your house. I mean, think about where you'd be if you drove 5 hours away from here. You're beyond Philadelphia. You're pushing Washington, D.C. You're definitely probably north of the border in Canada, right?
Yeah.
So you're 5 hours away from your house in Detroit, but still in Michigan. And you're sitting there at a bar and someone's like, hey, Tom Leyden, what's going on? I watch him. Like, dude, that's weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's so
Yeah.
crazy to think that but it speaks
So
to your
cool.
point about the passionate following
Yes.
that the Lions had, because people all over the state were always engaged.
Yeah, and it's I went to St. Louis for the Bruins Stanley Cup game, and I had 48 hours in that town, and it gave me this feeling of what a sports town. Not a very large area, but Busch Stadium, unbelievable. The resources, the knowledge that those fans have. They kind of reminded me of Boston too. You go into a dive bar, and they're asking you about your family, and they're talking about 90s Stanley Cup highlights. But it was these sports towns are so funny. They're very knowledgeable. They're passionate about their sports. It's not just they're not solely focused on one sport. You could talk the four major sports with them, which was I love it, and I have not gone to any games there. It's definitely on my bucket list that I want to do. But what a fun area to cover. It certainly got you ready to come to Boston when you had these championships to cover.
Phenomenal. Just being around the Big Ten and being part of whether it be a Big Ten tournament in basketball or a fight for a Big Ten championship in football. And then, of course, you'd have both Michigan and Michigan State competing every year in hockey and making runs towards the Frozen Four.
Big brother, little brother, they call each other.
Oh, there's all kinds of intrigue there. And don't get me going now that I have a daughter who's at Michigan State, right? So it's a lot of fun, and I miss it. I miss the people. I'm thrilled that Dahlia ended up going back there because it reignites our connection to the people in Michigan who we consider to be part of our family, and they consider us to be a part of their family. So my longtime sports director and mentor, Don Shane, is being inducted into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame on October 17th. And we were planning to go out for the Michigan State-Iowa game on October 19th. So we just upped the trip by a couple of days, and we're going to be there. And that's going to be great to see his wife and two kids and celebrate Don and so many other athletes who are being inducted. Pudge Rodriguez is going in that day. Jim Harbaugh is going in that day. Jake Long's going in that day. Braylon Edwards is going in that day. So there are people from every sport. I'm forgetting some off the top of my head. But, and speaking about Burleson and Orlovsky, Braylon Edwards is another guy, right? So he had been a Michigan grad and was done with his NFL career. Yeah. And it's like, okay, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And I remember being with Don and saying, like, we should get Braylon to come on and do our, Sunday morning sportscape with us and be our college football analyst.
Absolutely.
And he's still doing it. Right. So, and I love the fact, and I really appreciate the fact that when I joined their show a couple of years ago, before we even started the interview, he said, unprompted, he's like, this dude helped me start my career. I mean, that's at the end of the day what you really want it to be about.
If I'm not mistaken, Don Shane, a mentor of yours, someone who's been, a huge influence on you. He had some ties to Boston.
Oh, no question about it. He was here. He left great connection. He left during the 1985 season from Chicago to come to Boston. Yeah. So do that math, right? So the Patriots end up playing the Bears in the Super Bowl. And so he was assigned to cover the Bears for WBZ.
Yeah.
And he knew all the Bears, right? So he had an opportunity to share some of those stories and had those tight relationships. Was only there for a short amount of time, but he was here with Lobel. Yes. And he was told, soon as Bob retires, the job is yours.
Oh, it's the old Conan O'Brien. It was like the Conan O'Brien and Jay Leno situation.
So when did Bob Lobel retire, right?
Yeah.
Years later.
Yeah.
So Don actually ended up taking over the job at WXYZ, Channel 7, the ABC affiliate in Detroit in 1989. His first day on the job was the day after the Wolverines beat Seton Hall for the 89 NCAA championship.
Unbelievable.
So he started that Tuesday. And he had a run that was unbelievable. I call him and many others who were at WXYZ the pillars upon which the institution was built.
Yes.
And the institution was built on their personalities. And I think that local news, for the most part, has greatly moved away from the power of personality.
Yeah.
But what made that station watchable, what made that station lovable, was the fact that people knew the anchors, knew the reporters knew and loved each other. Yeah. They interacted with each other and had a rapport that made it television you wanted to watch.
Yeah.
Beyond what you were learning and beyond the headlines that were being shared with you, you wanted to spend that time with those people who you knew. And I think that that's changed.
It has. I mean, the competition then was us versus them. And now it seems like competition's, me versus, you versus that. And it's like, the world is abundant. Everyone can succeed, and I think that old school mentality is we're a family, we're a team, we win together, we lose together. Don, I think, also has some ties to Westwood. He covered the 1988 Thanksgiving game, and we have a clip, and I think we'll add it to this. But covered the 1988 team, quarterbacked by Greg Warren. Brad Pindell was on that team, and your mentor Don Shane did the highlight for it.
When you posted that to the WW_calls Instagram account, I was like, wait a minute, I know that voice, because I knew the voice even before we saw him on camera. And when I saw him on camera, I was like, wow, that's great. And I sent it to Mona, and I sent it to Justin, and I sent it to Lindsay, and they're like, wow, it's great just to hear the voice. Yeah. So you're leaving an impact far beyond just the audience here at Westwood that's following that Instagram account.
Yeah, it's fun, when you connect those dots, and then I even have a connection with Butch Stearns, your partner at Fox 25. We played in the Drew Bledsoe golf tournament, and it was like the last year before he was getting traded. It was right after the Super Bowl, and my dad bought a foursome. And, each foursome had like a celebrity, like Mr. Belding was there. Like there was some legendary, like Lynn Swan was there. Butch had the absolute blessing of being able to play with the Donahues. We was like Mr. Donahue and four Spaldings out there, we're 13, 14 years old, awkward, pimples all over our face. And Butch is probably hoping he's going to play with 25-year-old guys, have a couple beers, talk about Tom Brady.
No, I'm sure he loved it.
He did.
I'm sure he loved it.
He was fantastic. He was very interested in the conversation, and it really, you felt like he was very interested in what my dad was talking about, what he did for work. He knew our names, and he was such a really cool guy, and had a really good experience. And then 2 months later, before Red Sox games, WEI used to have a little setup, like right in like the Red Sox like souvenir shop. And he's up there with like some of the legends, like they had Pete Shepard and Glenn Ordway, and doing the pregame. And I see him and I point, and I'm like, he's not going to recognize me. And he goes, "Come on up." So I come on up, and he absolutely remembered who we were. And I said, "Hey, that was a lot of fun playing with you. You're like a professional athlete to me, because you're a guy on TV. You're fun. You make it." Awesome. But that was to spend 2 hours with you and pick your brain. That was a really cool time, and he couldn't have been more awesome about that. So I'm thankful for that. And that was an impression that my family had. That was really, really fun.
I'm going to help us with the segue here, because I referenced it before, and I'll tell it quickly that in 2015, when I did get the job here, basically what ended up happening is that Butch had been working as a freelancer throughout the 2014 Patriots season, and we basically both were applying for the same job. By the way, a job that he already had previously had.
Interesting.
But when Butch was 49, he was laid off from Fox 25, and he had spent at that point 5 years doing something else.
Yeah.
And he was still passionate about television news, still passionate about television sports. He stayed active with WEEI, and the opportunity came up with new ownership. They're like, "Who's Butch?" Right? So here he comes with another opportunity, and he had the job, and I'm sure wanted the sports director job, and then they gave it to me.
Yeah.
Right. So I knew it was going to be awkward, and I didn't even think he was going to be working there. But I got a call from the news director, Lee, that says, "Interesting development. Butch wants to stay." I was like, wow.
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
Yeah.
But I knew, based on some previous experience, that it was a great thing to have him part of the team.
Yeah.
Because he knows everybody.
Yeah.
And so many people know and love him.
Yeah.
And immediately we hit it off. And isn't it ironic that when I become the 49-year-old guy, I got laid off from Fox 25 for financial reasons.
Yeah.
And so Butch ends up taking over the job again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's weird how life is cyclical in that way, but we have remained true friends, and it's just the nature of the business, and you got to figure out what's next, which took me to kind of what we're doing now.
Yeah. And you got into publishing, which was something, it was new. Had you done that in the, previously? Or was it something you said, you know what, I have a skill set, I see an opportunity in the town, and, it's something that I love taking risks. I'm going to go out and give this a shot. What was kind of your path towards making that decision?
Well, it didn't come without a pity party, because, you get laid off from a
Absolutely.
job that, everyone knows you as the guy who's on TV.
Yeah.
And Tom Leyden, the sportscaster. And it's like, oh my God, it's like, that's kind of who I am.
Yeah.
And, it hurts.
Absolutely.
And it hurts your ego, and you're trying to figure out what's next. And it didn't take me long to say, like, this is not for me, because I was able to ultimately come to the realization that it sounds dramatic, but I felt like I was almost in an abusive relationship with local television news, because you just sort of accepted it for how it was. But that doesn't mean that it's okay. Like, I'm not a big fan of how a lot of the people who work at these local television stations are treated, how they're overworked, how they're underpaid, how more and more programming is added. And they're like, oh, and you're going to do that. And, oh, yeah, no, you're not going to get paid any more money. And, oh, yeah, we're going to give you unlimited time off, but that's really just because we don't want to have to pay you overtime. So wink, wink, when you need a day off, take the day off. There were a lot of things that were changing in terms of the behind the scenes at every station. I learned quickly that the grass was not greener at any other station. And I certainly was not going to be beholden to any one person and give them almighty thanks for giving me 20 minutes of their time.
Yes.
I'm better than that.
Yes.
Right? You have to have enough
know your value.
self-confidence, enough respect of yourself that it's like, I don't owe you the world because you gave me a 10-minute phone call.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So when I had enough of those, I was like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
And it took a shot in the face from my sister to say, like, you can do a lot more than just look in the camera and talk. So what are you going to do with the skill set that you've built over nearly 30 years? And so after I got through the ho-hum, woe is me moments, I started looking around and I found an opportunity. There was a magazine that existed, a community magazine in Natick, and they were looking for somebody to take it over. And I looked at how it worked, the algorithms, the ecosystem, the infrastructure of the way this business worked. And I said, ooh, I like that. I could absolutely do that. I don't want to do it in Natick though. I want to do it in Westwood. I want to do it. So I'm doing it in the town that I live with people who I know and be doing it as my kids go up through the high school system. So I'm going to be so close to all those other parents, and there will inherently be stories that I know people will want to hear, that I know based on my experience that I can help shape well. So it kind of started from there. I called up the company Best Version Media and I said, okay, I saw your ad for the magazine in Natick. I'm not interested in that, but how do you feel about doing a magazine in Westwood, Massachusetts? And so the market development team looked at it, said, we'll get back to you. And within 48 hours, they said, we've looked at it. We think it's a great market to do what we do. If you're willing to take the risk, you're basically an independent contractor running your own business and using the infrastructure of this company that does magazines across North America. So I'm one of 1,100 publishers, and the company publishes 1,300 publications every month from Vancouver, British Columbia to Miami, Florida. And you take it upon yourself to shoulder the risk, build your own empire locally, take it in the direction that you think is best for your own local business while they give you all the support that you need in Wisconsin. The design, the printing, the distribution by mail, the contract administration, the sales materials, the collection, all of that stuff is done by them. They call it the back office, and it's invaluable. And I've just ran with it I made the decision in maybe late January of 2022. And at that point, once you're in, you got to go. You got to really, really, really hustle, because in essence, at the beginning, you're selling a ghost. You're walking around town talking to these business owners, many of whom I didn't really know. That's an aspect of this we didn't touch on. But when I lived here for 8 years or 7 years, I didn't really know much about the local business. I kind of just lived here because it was close to work. Right? It was convenient. And so now I was engaged in the town and meeting people who I had never really had coffee with before, or had breakfast with before, and just trying to bridge as many of those gaps as I could and explain what the ultimate vision was to people who were looking at me like I was crazy. And I finally was able to get the green light to go. You basically got to sell 13 sponsorship deals on average to get sent to press. And so I luckily was able to get that done in 22 days. So I was hustling.
Unbelievable.
And we ultimately got the first magazine out into mailboxes in May of 2022. So now it's like, okay, who are we going to put on the cover? And what story are you going to tell? And that's even hard, because the people you're trying to convince to be on your cover, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? You know, it's like, what do you mean? Like, this thing doesn't exist. So you know the family well. I called up the Blomquists because I knew that generationally they had had great success as athletes here in Westwood. Both mom and dad were phenomenally successful. And they had 4 kids who were either engaged in the school at the time or had recently graduated. And I knew in my mind, I was like, okay, this is going to be, I know it's going to be kind of a soft launch. People are going to say, oh, here comes the sports guy. But I'm like, born to win. I saw it seared in my mind. I knew that Born to Win was our first issue's headline. And they were very warm and receiving. I mean, then we have Rick Byrne, who's our photographer, who's like, who the hell's this guy? And what are we doing here? And I guess I'm going to show up for this photo shoot. And it's really taken off from there. So the first publication in May was 20 pages in 2022. And our October issue of 2024 is 56 pages with contributions from more than 15 people from around the community. It's expanded to the website, the social media pages, the events, all the stuff that's made it what it is. And it's really community building and just trying to capitalize on all of the different experiences that I've had, which actually did start in publishing when I was an assistant in the publishing department at the National Football League as a 21-year-old.
That's right. I saw that you were sales for publishing for the NFL. That's interesting. That's awesome. I mean, so it was in your DNA. And you know, what can you say? Well, one question I have, and I think it's fascinating because you know it reminds me of like when we had the conversation with Paul Lilla about taking risks. You know, and going out there. You know, everyone has these aspirations of I'd like to do this, or I'd like to try this. Sometimes you're forced into it, you know. I wouldn't say you were forced into it in your situation. You could have done a number of things. You could have gone and worked somewhere and just been kind of a slave to the industry.
I could have left.
Yeah.
Right? But then that's where life comes in. And like, I'm not moving the kids again.
No.
Like, we just moved 6.5 years ago. They're in high school now. We're not going to go. This is a place that has a good school system. There are some roots here, and it would really upset the apple cart if we left again.
Yeah.
But you do have to have faith in yourself. And what I realized is like, wow, you really have done a lot, and you've been exposed to a lot at a very high level, and you understand marketing at a very high level, and you understand publishing and sales at a very high level. And now you're able to shrink your circle and work with other people who are like-minded. Because frankly, most of the people who work with us as sponsors are running their own businesses.
Yep.
So entrepreneurial people who've opened their own businesses, it's like, hey, I have an expertise that can help you. Yeah. And I also can offset that or complement that with an ability to create content that I think the community is going to want to engage with regularly. So that combination of me working with you as a marketing partner and also creating attractive content on a consistent basis, we're going to build something here. Yeah. And just come along for the ride. Because the more creative you're going to be, like, all you got to do is get some creative bugs flying in my head, and suddenly something crazy comes out, and we're doing something cool together.
Evan and I kind of have that experience with podcasts because we bring guests on and like, I'm going to be boring, or, it's not, people aren't going to like it. And we say, just wait. When we have conversations, you don't know where the conversation is going to go. And everyone that thought that like the episode would be boring has been fascinating. And, to have that vision and to know, or the confidence to know kind of what the operation is going to look like, or even the direction or what your plan is. It's a beautiful thing to see it all unfold. I've had an opportunity to kind of see what you do behind the scenes. It's a lot of work every single month. Talk us through all the things that you have to do between releasing a new, September's issue, between September and then releasing October. What are those things that you have to do before it gets published?
So right now we're taping this on September 24th. So we're living the September issue. It just landed in mailboxes right now. Okay. So I'm living with the reaction to that. People who are reading things, saying things about it. October's done and already sent to production. It's going to be printed. So I've already gone through that process of developing those stories, seeing how they're going to look in print, getting the proof, working with all the clients to get their expert contributions in there, doing the business profiles, which typically start as podcasts, putting it all together, getting contributions from people saying like, hey, Tony Mullen, I saw you out there, and why don't you do a story about this? He's like, really? I'm like, yes, that's what's going to make this work. That's what makes it successful when people from all over the community are contributing stuff. So I've lived October already, and I'm already looking ahead to November. And I'm already thinking, okay, which expert contributors are going to give me some stuff for the November issue? Who are we going to have on the cover? We're shooting the cover of the November issue tomorrow. Yeah. So I'm in that world where you're kind of living a 3-month cycle at the same time. People reacting to September, nobody knowing what October is yet, but they will. And it's done for us. Our content coordinator, Diana Donahue, does an incredible job helping me keep all this stuff on the tracks. And now we're looking towards November. And then your personal schedule comes in. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be so busy in the first couple of weeks of October. And how am I going to get all this done?
And how do you balance that? Does it feel at times like you're on the hamster wheel? And then how do you jump off to, have a personal life and, go to games and see your daughters play sports?
Okay, so the frank answer to that is that the magazine would be bigger and more successful if I didn't take the time to do more of the personal stuff. Good. That is honest to God truth. Yeah. And if I get feedback from people at Best Version Media who are like, yours could be bigger, it could be better. And I'm like, okay, we're doing okay. Yeah. Like we're doing all right. But I do agree with them that if I was just no distractions, nothing but business all the time, it would be bigger. Yeah. That would entail more work. That would entail more time doing that and less time seeing the kids play. But the blessing in losing your job and not having seen so many games because I was stuck in the studio is that all of a sudden I was coaching the girls' teams. Yeah. I was at each and every one of their games. I didn't miss a performance. And when we look back 10, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, that's what you remember. And I just hope someday that the girls are like, I really appreciate that you and Mom were at our games. Yeah. And that you coached our team. And for us, that's why it was such a big deal when you two were there in May and Dahlia and her teammates were able to, get a share of that title for the softball team, because that doesn't happen in a day or a week or a month or a year. That was 5-6 years of work for those girls to kind of finally get to that point. And when I walked into the gym this fall and I saw that softball banner in Bader Gymnasium that said Tri-Valley League Champs 2024, it brings a tear to your eye. You feel a little cheesy.
Forever.
But I send that picture to Dahlia and she just responds from Michigan State. She's like, fire. And that's to me, what it's all about.
Yeah, how special is it? Morgan and I were there for that May 22nd game, softball versus Norwood. Not only that, it was senior night, and Dahlia was the only senior on that team. But now, even this year, we had the opportunity, you and I, to do a volleyball game recently. How special is it to watch your daughters play Westwood High School sports?
It's great. You get to see them grow as people. You get to see the relationships that morph over the course of time. I think for both of them, there's been great concern, if that's the right word, going into every season, which took me a bit by surprise. Like, wait a minute, like you're going to be good. Like, you've been building a lot here, but there's that level of concern because there's a lot that's unknown. And so as we talk about the volleyball team, they've started off really hot, and to see collectively their confidence grow is fantastic. And it's different with volleyball because I haven't even for a second coached her. So it has been 100% in the stands, watching hundreds of matches and just absorbing it. With softball, it was different. And I do appreciate the fact that they were cool with me coaching them because I really did enjoy working with that group as they grew up. And it was sad because, number one, I thought Olivia was going to play through senior year, and she's not because she stopped playing after freshman year. I thought we were going to have it through 2026.
Yeah.
But it kind of ended in 2024. It's like, oh, what am I going to do next year? Because there's still people who are not my kids who I have great interest in seeing them succeed and seeing how the next season goes. And so I think this next softball season is going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to go. And I'm not going to have that same investment because my own daughter isn't playing. But you can be sure that when you go to Morrison on senior night, I'll be on the mic and I'll be jamming the tunes. And the trains are going to be driving by. I mean, that was an unbelievable scene. And I think that they should consider playing more games.
I talked to Gillis about it. And, I think we can convince more games. It's a smaller field, so not much space on the sidelines and whatnot to watch it. But for under the lights in Westwood, I mean, we don't have lights at the Westwood High School, but that backdrop, the big trees, historical place. You got the fire department there too.
It's phenomenal.
And then when you're on the mic, it was hysterical because like big hits were, I remember the freshman Julia Tartufo's hitting a double, and so is Bella Gentile. And Julia hits in the gap. I think ended up getting an RBI, and I hear Tom on the microphone, Tartufo, and I'm dying. I'm like, what a home field advantage. And it was so much fun. And I think there's a lot of commonalities. When you talked about Pennsylvania and your work there, you kind of opened up your eyes to new sports like wrestling. You never really kind of were into it, but you appreciated it by starting to cover it. I never really watched much softball growing up. My sister played for a little bit. I've never really gone to the soccer, boys or girls soccer games, field hockey, but I appreciate it and I like it. Now that I've done it, and to see how hard these kids work, and to see the character that these kids have when they're wearing a Westwood jersey. It changes kind of your relationship with these sports you might not have had a relationship with. And, I could totally agree with what you were saying there, where it's fun. We got a great sports town, and, I'm excited about softball next year with what is coming back, and also the confidence that they have after what they did last year.
So when you think about the fact that all three of us have been around sports probably for more than 100 years combined, and then you put into perspective that these girls are 15, 14.
Yeah.
They've only been aware of sports for 10 years at most, right? I love pressing the emotional buttons, and I won't use names, but an example is this. There was one player who was being intentionally walked, and I was like, oh, this is an opportunity. Yeah. So I knew that our next player who was up was an excellent hitter, and I knew that what motivated her most was anger. So I walked up to her. I was like, do you realize what's happening right now? She goes, what do you mean? I'm like, they're walking her because they think they can get you out. And she goes, oh no. Right. And so to see that play out, and that's just our experience being put to use.
Yeah.
Of course she hits a double, clears the bases.
Yes.
And it's because you knew as a coach you could press that right button. The other thing, and I'm going to put this challenge out there specifically for Abby Johnson, who is a junior this year, plays third base for the softball team. We've been working on this in theory for many, many years. But I was coaching a bunch of kids once about, listen, when there's a foul ball that's in foul territory on the third base line, frankly, if you're a right-handed thrower, it can be argued that the best way to catch it is with your bare hand, right? So they're like, shut up, right? They're like, shut up, Mr. Leyden. What are you talking about? And we have been joking about that from day one. And I'm telling you, one day, in some circumstance, I can guarantee it that Abby Johnson is going to be running.
We're going to save this clip.
She's going to put her hand out and she's going to make that barehanded catch. Yeah. And I just hope I'm there. But if I'm not there, I hope that one of you guys is shooting it.
We're going to save this clip. But I think like Ozzie Guillen did that at one point, running in the outfield, and it was just natural.
It is, because if you think about the angles, it's like you can extend your glove to here, and meanwhile, this hand can get here. Yes. So sometimes just that little bit of space makes the difference. And, you're trying to teach this to a 12-year-old kid and they think you're crazy, but you just plant that seed. Yeah. And that's what I've enjoyed with everybody. And of course, we can't get through the episode without talking about the excellence of Bridget Mulkeen, and to identify her as a 10, 11, 12-year-old as somebody who was going to really change the face of the program. Yeah. And everyone else just get on her coattails and just lift up your game. And if you can match her intensity and just a little bit of her work ethic, everyone's going to succeed. So I don't know if you know this. I think it's public. It's not hidden, but she's going to play at St. Anselm. She made that commitment to play college softball at St. Anselm, a Division II school. Yeah. Very happy with that. Congrats. And very happy that the decision is behind her. Yes. But, the softball team's got Bridget. And then, of course, Sasha Marino is going to go play hockey at Assumption. Which is great. So you got some very talented kids, and actually a freshman class that's coming up that's going to add to the roster.
And you're going to have freshmen last year that contributed with Walsh, with Tartufo, Gentile, that are now solid, and they got experience. Yeah. And they have confidence is huge. When you have varsity confidence, that's a lot different than the JV confidence. You have varsity proven confidence versus some of the best teams, in the TVL.
And even if you didn't play, just being there and understanding and watching it, learning, and understanding the ebb and flow of, and this has happened with the volleyball team a lot this year too, where I've been impressed with when things aren't going well, they don't give up and they do respond. And it's the teams that respond and don't melt that typically end up playing pretty late into the season. Yeah.
A question for you. This is more just professional question. You are exceptional at interviews when you're sitting down, say like Brad Pindell, whether you're sitting down with Calvin Johnson. I know you're also someone who does a lot of preparation. You are getting information on, what are some questions, background. That's one thing, but to be able to form the sentences and articulate it in a way that, and how it's articulated is another thing. Is that something that just came natural to you, or is it something that you worked hard at, and eventually more at bats, it just got to a place where, when you do it, it's exceptional?
Two-pronged answer. One is, just like the two of you, it was in my blood from an early age. I do recall the first time I was ever actually interviewed. Yeah. It was when I was 14 and our baseball team was making a run, and we were having a post-game dinner or maybe a pre-game lunch at a restaurant, and the coach said, go talk to him. And so this reporter was in my face and he started asking me questions. And I just answered based on my experience, my knowledge of the team, what I thought might happen based on what we had achieved so far. And the guy looked at me and he goes like, you're going to be a sports writer one day. And I said, well, I want to be on TV. He goes, you could do that too. And just little things like that when you're young give you the confidence. Now, after 6 years in business, I quit that job and I said, I'm going to go pursue being on television. And I got the job in Allentown. And I will tell you that 2.5 months in, I was basically put on probation saying, you've got a month to prove yourself. I did not come out of the gate strong. Mm-hmm. And I was a fish out of water. I was a bit overwhelmed, a bit intimidated. And I remember not going to a friend of mine's wedding because I'm like, I got to focus. Yeah. I got to I'm going to lose this job if I don't step it up. Yeah. And I was able to prove myself in that month, which was great. But a large part of being able to get better is to watch what you do when you're on TV. And I remember specifically hearing a story that Jerry Rice told in one of his documentaries, where here's the greatest wide receiver to ever play. And Jerry Rice literally watched every single rep of every single practice to see what he could do to get better. So at one point in time, I would record every single newscast, and I would come back and I'd watch it and, oh, don't say that word again. Yeah. Or be careful about the you knows. Yeah. Or, you hesitated. Don't use funk. That's a dangerous word to say on television. Yes. I don't say NCAA. I say NCAA because I always stumble over NCAA. Rivalry has always gotten me. And it's, when you say rivalry week on the air once, you don't want to say it twice. Yeah. So I think just watching yourself and understanding what it takes to get somebody to give you a good answer and give them an opportunity to give you an answer and listen to what they're saying so that you'll hear somebody's end of a question. And if a lot of reporters will be listening, but not listening. Yeah. And they're just thinking about what they're going to ask next. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, I really want to get to this next question here. And then you're like, okay, did he finish speaking yet? Okay, so next question, right? And you're not even listening to what the person's saying. That's what Don taught me. Yeah. Don Shane taught me, like, you have to listen to the words they're saying. And if you can react to what they're saying in the time, and it may not take you in the direction you thought you were going to go, but it will be a better interaction because it's not so stilted and it's a more natural conversation. Yeah.
That's what, when we put questions together, I think out of 20 questions, we probably ask 4 of them because they go in a direction, and to have follow-up questions, on fascinating topics, I think, make for good conversation and ultimately then, segueing and whatnot. But that's great advice. I heard Jerry Seinfeld talk about how obsessive he is at, when he's putting jokes together, writing it down and the repetition and what to say, what to take out. Mm-hmm. When I watch some old games, I cringe, but you can't be afraid to then get back up to the plate and try something, and take that out, but I think getting those at bats and not being scared are some of the best things I think anyone can do.
Here's the reality of this business of being on television, on radio, doing podcasts, whatever it might be. If you're not better tomorrow than you are today, then you're not doing a good job. And that's just the essence of it. So whatever you look at a year from now, you're going to look back and say like, that wasn't great because you've gotten better. Yes. That's the essence of being in the public eye or telling stories. Hopefully you become a better writer. Hopefully you become a better presenter. Yeah. Hopefully you become a better editor, producer, whatever it might be. But that only happens through the mistakes that you live through. That happens still. Yep. I mean, you can talk about having 350 people at the bean farm for a party, but we're not talking about the party that we have to cancel because people said they didn't want to come. Why? Yeah. And what lessons did you learn from that? Yeah. And just because one thing doesn't work doesn't mean you're not successful. Because one thing doesn't work means that that's an opportunity to fix that area of it, but don't lose the momentum and the positivity that you have over on this side because you are doing some good things. Yeah. And, not only have you been doing great things with Westwood Living, you've also been a very big help collaborating with Westwood Media Center, particularly with the sports season and bringing on some partners. Talk a little bit about that relationship and how fortunate do we have to have such great partners that are supporting Westwood sports. Incredible. First of all, I think everybody who works at this building is probably overqualified for this job. Yes. Right? Great experience, great creativity. And it's different than just coming in here in the 1990s and pointing a camera and putting something on a television screen. You're talking about having to feed multiple beasts. Talking about a television screen. You're talking about YouTube. You're talking about Facebook. You're talking about a Twitter feed, an Instagram feed. Are we doing Reels? Are we on TikTok? What are we doing? How are we doing it? Who's going to be responsible for what? And I think what Marie and Evan do is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Charlotte, Melinda, more at like the leadership level. And it is a resource for this town that needs to be appreciated more, and I think is growing. That appreciation level is growing more because the people who work here are doing an incredible job. Just compare the work that comes out of this building to the work that comes out of similar buildings in other towns, and you will see that what comes out of this building is incredibly, incredibly valuable. So you get added to the mix by doing all these games. And I remember talking to Melinda saying to her, like, well, who sponsors the sports broadcasts? She was, nobody. I was like, all right, hold my beer. But the point is not that I was going to magically make things happen, but I'm in that arena and I'm talking to people and it adds to the package of what we're offering. So Cadillac of Norwood, if you want to reach the Westwood audience, here's the best way that you could conceivably do that. And we're going to do that digitally. We're going to do that in print. We're going to do that in person with you hosting a party at your place. And oh, by the way, now I have a television opportunity for you.
Yeah.
And isn't it great that you are part of what so many people in this town are passionate about?
Yes.
And oh, also, we're going to put together a great commercial for you, which looks phenomenal.
Awesome.
And is going to like leave an impact on your customers. So at the end of the day, not only are you engaging with your community, but your brand is growing. It's enhancing your brand because of your commitment to something people know, love, and trust. And they're going to want to do business with you because you have now engaged with something that the community of Westwood finds to be important. This is my sales pitch, people. So if you want to help support what's going on here, you can still step up because we will find ways to do that. Don't forget, WMC is a 501c3. It is a nonprofit. And when you give money to WMC, it's a charitable donation for you that is helping your business in the long run. So it has been great. And I know that we all over deliver and our plates are spinning at all times, but we do it from a place of passion and the fact that we're committed to our town, and we want everybody, even the people who are sponsors, to feel good about their association with what we're collectively doing.
Absolutely. It's been a super exciting start to the season. You know, the spot, you know, in between the halves and quarters and whatnot is awesome. You know, we're Cadillac guys ourselves, you know, love driving Cadillac. And
now we should tease a little bit.
Yes.
Because you're talking like homespun from scratch, from the heart.
Yeah.
Like Westwood bleeding green ad. Wait till you see the ad we're doing for Arch Orthodontics. And I know that Evan's in the middle of working on it right now, but Evan and Melinda and I went over to Arch about a week and a half ago. We put together a script. It is 100% local.
Yeah.
And you would think that it was made by an ad agency in New York City. I'm not just tooting your horn. Because I saw that thing the first time and I was like, he's going to be blown away.
Yeah.
And it's insane to think that that comes from this building, but that's the amount of talent that comes from this building. So yeah, the Caddy ad was great, shot by my friend Justin LaRose, who's another one of our partners from JPL Media Works. But the Arch ad was done right by these people here at WMC, and it'll debut shortly.
It was a fun ad to film too. I mean, it's sitting in the edit and just kind of going through it. There's sort of like, just when you're sitting and editing something, whether it's even the sports or this, you can do so much with it. It's kind of like a blank canvas and there's an art to it. And that's what I really love about editing. I'm really excited about this ad. I mean, once I found the music, there's always parts too where you find these touches, and you've seen the drafts and some of these clips, and when you put it in, you're just like, this is it. And it gets you just riled up and excited. And I'm excited to have this debut in October with Arch Orthodontics support.
I hope that you get at least a little bit of a kick out of the fact that I do notice your nuances. So when I do give my feedback, I'm just like, oh my God, I love the crowd noise in the background. And I love the transition from the screaming to the, you know, like there's so much that's behind the scenes artfully done. And it's the things that make a difference in the presentation of an ad like that. And he's got it. And Marie's got it. And Charlotte's got it. And Melinda's got it. So all these companies, if you're not already participating in what's going on here, please join the party because we will take care of you and you'll get something that's beyond your wildest dreams.
Yeah. No, they're some of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. Some of the most talented as well, and you know, pretty good at golf too. Melinda, you know, just won the Top Golf Westwood Media Center Open the other day. So shout out Melinda.
Way to go, Melinda.
So last question I have for you, Tom. You've been in Westwood for close to 10 years.
Yeah. What's next?
What has Westwood meant for you? You know, do you see yourself being a Westwood lifer, and you know, how proud are you to be a part of this community?
Very proud. And I have conversations with my sisters, right?
Yeah.
One sister's 10 years older than I am. She just wants to know, well, where are you going to be?
Yeah.
Not me,
Yeah.
but just collectively, the kids, the family. Like she wants to be around the family. And I think ultimately, just like your family, right? You want to be close by.
Yeah.
Where that is, who knows?
Yeah.
I do love the fact, you know, my best friend, for instance, moved to Omaha, Nebraska. And I loved the fact that his dad, who had nothing to do with Nebraska ever in his life, ultimately said to his son, like, hey, find me a house in Nebraska. I'm moving out. You know, if my kids someday decide that this is not the place for them and they move someplace else in the country, and I have grandkids, I'm blessed that way, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm going to be attracted to maybe doing that more so than I'd be attracted to putting down long-term roots here. I mean, if you look at it, I have lived a lot of different places, right? This is getting up there in terms of one of the longer ones.
Yeah.
And I think that every single place you live is a chapter in your life.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that when you go to college, a new chapter starts. And I love that she went out of state and that she's going to get this Michigan experience again. And she'll never forget it.
Yeah.
So I live every day here, very grateful for the friendships that I have built. Amazed. I mean, when you have 350 people at a party and you look at yourself and two things, you're like, oh my God, this didn't exist 2.5 years ago. And then I didn't live here 9 years ago.
Never existed.
Like crazy.
This never happened in town.
Right. So I love that we can do that,
Yeah.
but that's not me doing that.
Yeah.
That's me igniting the flames to get the community to do that. And if you can get what I'd call like a little party starter, as I am, that's all it takes, because it's in there. You just need someone to sort of find it and make it come to the forefront.
Yeah. Well, it's been a remarkable thing you're doing. You're bringing people together. Westwood's been a town for as long as I've known that, people are somewhat private, but you've kind of knocked down some barriers for people to come together, to get to know each other, to find commonalities. There's, everyone different backgrounds, but to find that common ground. And a lot of the times that common ground is the love for Westwood, and to bring them together and to celebrate, but to also learn, engage. There's a lot of different professional industry leaders that can help out in a lot of different ways, and being able to connect at these events, to then potentially work together, is something that's never been done in this town. So, very thankful that you've brought that to this town and kind of turned this community into a more open, and a community that gets out together, and celebrates.
I appreciate you saying that. We're just starting. It takes everybody. And all I ask is this town continues to grow. Everybody isn't always going to love everybody. And I know that everybody doesn't love me. And you have to come to peace with that. And I'm sure there are people there like, well, you shut this guy up. And I get that. But if we can just try to ignite a little bit of that commonality that you're talking about and that community that I think is so important, there's always going to be differences. There's going to be different people. And I think we need to return to a point in time where those differences of opinions do not necessarily need to alienate us from each other, because there are those common traits. And it's okay to not agree with people. Mm-hmm. It's not okay to not treat people with respect.
Correct.
So treat people with respect across the board and understand that, listen, we may not agree on 10 out of 10 things. Yeah. Maybe that, it may be that extreme, but that doesn't mean that we can't have a respectful relationship with each other.
Absolutely. Well, Tom, you're definitely a person we'll have to bring on for more, because I don't even think we hit the tip of the iceberg, where I could talk sports with you for probably 3 weeks, and Evan would tell us that, hey, it's October 25th, guys. We need to use the studio. Go. Yeah.
So the only thing I'll leave with this is that I always said if I ever wrote a book, and I don't think I ever will, it'll always be like, you don't know me, but you'll love my stories. Because I've just been so blessed to have these crazy stories throughout my life. And thank you for having me on here. And to your point, we'll get together again, and maybe we'll just make that like top 10 moments in your career of like wild stuff. Like when Brett Favre told me he lost $3,000 and I was making $23,000 at the time. I'm like, dude, you just dropped $3,000 and it's like no big deal. I'm like,
and you need the Muhammad Ali story. Love to hear that too.
Yeah, all right, there's tons. I got that. We got a Shaq story. We got a Michael Keaton story. Yeah, we've got all kinds. They go all kinds.
We'll have to do another episode. Yeah. But thank you so much for coming on, and more so, thank you for everything you're doing in the community. Thank you for everything you're doing to help out Westwood Media Center as well. And really appreciate it. It was a great conversation, and I know the guests are gonna enjoy it. So thank you all for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you all on the next one.